timer puede. Anybody got any prayer requests or anything you need to say or do for the Lord tonight? Just do remember this. Just do remember these requests. Anyone else? Just remember that. Just remember this request. Anyone else? If not, I'll go to the Lord in prayer. all the time. It's not just sometimes, but He's good to us all the time, and I'm thankful for that. Tim, there's a lot of times I don't deserve Him to be good to me, but He still is, and that's that great love that the Bible talks about, and I'm thankful that He loves us that much. That no matter what, no matter where we are, or the type of person that we think we are, God still loves us, and He still loves you tonight. Has anybody else got a song or anything else on your heart tonight? We were thinking there all week. We've been praying, and I think since last Sunday and Monday, God's really been trying to show me, Tim, which direction we were going to go. And it was like each day, He began to send something else that came along with it to get us to where we are today. I think Wednesday night service that God began to show then, and I believe that I'm thankful how God works. He doesn't leave us hanging. He's always there to help us when we need that help. And I truly believe that when we get up here to do this thing, we want to do it to honor and glorify Him, and not for ourselves, but to honor and glorify God, because He's been so good to us, and we just want to share that with the lost and dying world and with everybody. So as we began to look this week and I began to think there, you all. I think Wednesday night, Larry began to talk about a ball team, and we began to think there. I began to think about this before, but God brought it back up to my remembrance Wednesday night. We began there to think. Tim, I was blessed with the opportunity to be able to start coaching baseball from the time that I graduated high school, and I've been able to see a lot of kids come through the system there, and been able to see a change in them and all those different things. But as the more and more that I had seen kids come through, something that I learned as a coach was sometimes kids are going to respond differently. And I thought there how I looked at my own self, Tim. I remember growing, especially in high school, a lot of times it took the coach really getting stern and angry with me to get my attention. I was one of those types of players that's what I responded to. I responded to that, but I've also been around some that didn't respond to that. They responded to me just coming, or the other coach coming and just talking to them and having a conversation. We all respond in different ways, Tim. And I was thinking there how over the last few months, God's been sending different preachers. He's been sending the same preachers but different messages, and He's been sending them in different ways. And I thought there how sometimes those messages can feel like they're motivation to try to motivate us to keep moving on. Sometimes those messages that come can seem a little harsh and seem a little, like I said, Jim, that's what it took when I was in high school to get my attention. And sometimes nowadays, that's what it takes to get my attention, is God to be a little harsh and honest to us. So if you have it this way, we all begin to respond differently. But the question I have, and I wasn't planning on this being my thought, but God knows what He's doing tonight, is how are we going to respond, and will we respond tonight to God's Word? And because I truly believe that God's been trying to get the church's attention for the last few months now, because I do believe that we do have lost here, and I do believe that they need to be saved, and we should have a desire on our heart to see them saved. But sometimes, Tim, our actions don't show it. Our actions completely show something different. We sometimes, as God's people, we have the I don't care attitude. That attitude of if it don't affect me, then it doesn't matter. In church, I'm here to tell you tonight, when God saved you, He put a love inside of you for you to love your neighbor. What did He say? The second great commandment was to love thy neighbor as thyself. But the first and great commandment was to love God with with all thy heart, mind, and soul, to love Him with everything that you've got. So tonight, are we going to respond, or are we going to continue to just sit there and be idle, Tim? We're going to read for just a second, and this is very familiar scripture in Matthew chapter number 14. We know this story, but we're just going to read 2 verses of it. We're going to start reading in verse number 28. And it says, And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. And that's as far as we'll read tonight. For now, we may look at some other scriptures here in just a little while. But Tim, I began to think there, we look at where Peter, or we look where the disciples were. He had told the disciples to get on the boat and go to the other side. And he had went to go and pray. But it says as they began to get out into the midst of the water, there was a great storm that came up. The wind was boisterous and it was contrary and all these things. And they began to be afraid. And as they began to look, they seen somebody walking on the water. But the part I like about this, Tim, is when we get to verse 28, it says, And Peter answered him, said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. So Peter began to ask him there, Tim. He began to say, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come out on the water. And I know the Bible teaches us, and we'll get to it just in a second here, the Bible teaches us that we're saved into a good work, Tim. So we know that once we've been saved, we are to go. If you'd have it this way, we was going to read it, but he begins in chapter number 28 of Matthew, he begins to commission the disciples after he had already came back, and Jesus had came back and he began to go talk to the disciples. He commissioned them to go and to preach his word and to go and to share the gospel, doing all these things for the Lord. And I believe that same commission that he gave the disciples that day, Tim, he's began to give us that same commission as God's people. He's began to save us, and that's why we say we're saved into a good work. He's commissioned us to continue to share his word, Tim. That's why we're still here. And as I began to look here, Peter began to tell him, he said, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come out. And what did he say? He said, we'll read, and he said, come. And we'll look there, and the Lord told Peter to step out of the boat. And so many times as God's people, we see that everybody around, this goes back to what we heard in Sunday school this morning, but I'm going to tell you something, God begins to tell us to get out of the boat so many times, Tim, and we want to. Don't get me wrong. As God's people, we don't like when everybody else around us is worshiping, praising, and all these things. And it feels a little bad when everybody else gets to raise their hand, and everybody else gets to get excited, and everybody else has a burden. We want that as God's people. Because we want to see people saved, we want our cup to overflow. We want to be an example to this lost and dying world. Because I don't know, it was preached not too long ago that we are, if we're not going to be example to our kids and to this world, who's going to do it tonight, church? It'll be the world that begins to be that example, and that's not the example that we want our kids to see. But so many times as God's people, we want to get out of the boat. Tim, we do, but there's something that's always standing in the way. Peter here, it says that Peter began to get out of the boat. But sometimes, Tim, I think the reason why that we can't begin to worship God and praise God, I believe that the first thing we have to realize tonight is when we come to God's house, Tim, we talked about it this morning, but when we come to God's house, we are come to his house to worship him. Tim, we don't come to work. We labor outside so that we can bring people into the house of God. But when we come into God's house, we are to worship him in spirit and truth. But so many times we find ourselves not able to do that because we've not got out of the boat, Tim. Because on Monday, I didn't get out of the boat. On Tuesday, I didn't get out of the boat. I felt myself that way. We talked this morning in Sunday school a little bit about how so many times we try to wait till Wednesday, or we try to wait till Sunday to get ready to come to God's house. But I'm going to tell you something. If we've decided not to work for Him Monday through Saturday, it's going to be hard to try to get ready to Him on Sunday. So I'm going to tell you, you may have a desire to get out of the boat tonight, but there's something standing in the way. There's something that happened on Monday. There's something that's not happening on Monday. There's something that's not happening on Tuesday. There's something that's not happening Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We have to realize that tonight, that this can't just be something that we just throw together, Tim. We got to build it up, don't we? It has to be something that's built up in our life. God has to become the number one. And I begin to look at that, Tim. So many times in our walk and in our life as God's people, God's not number one, is He, Tim? Doesn't the Bible teach us that God has to be number one? He has to be number one over our wife. He has to be number one over our kids. He has to be number one over our family. He has to be number one over our friends. He has to be number one over our job. So many times God comes in number 6 in our life. Sometimes He comes number 7, number 10, because He's not number one in our life. There's something that's what's keeping you in the boat tonight, because God's not number one in your life. And you may be sitting there thinking, well, that's okay. I can come and I can get it right and all these different things, but I'm going to tell you something tonight, church. You're not going to be the best friend that you need to be to somebody else if you're sitting in the boat. You're not going to be the parent that you need to be to your kids if you're sitting in the boat. You're not going to be able to be an example to this lost and dying world but when we're sitting in the boat. And God has to be number one. In that, when God is number one and we begin to put Him first, He can begin to lead us and guide us in the right direction. So many times we find ourselves just thinking, why is everybody else around me beginning to worship? But I don't get to. Tim, I was thinking there, we hear those on Mother's Day. We begin to hear those good messages to the mothers. We begin to hear how good they are and how we should love them and how we should lift them up and how true that is. But Tim, I ain't going to lie to you. Those Father's Day messages that I begin to come to church, I don't look forward to those, Tim. And I believe that the reason why I don't look forward to those is because God begins to remind us exactly where the fathers, the husbands, and the men need to be. He begins to show us exactly where we need to be. And Tim, I'm going to say this tonight. It may make you upset, but I'm going to say this tonight, that so many times the men have become secondary. The men have not kept up the spiritual leader of their church, Tim. So many times when it's time to go to God's house, it's the women going to the men saying, hey, it's time to go to church. Are you going tonight? Are you going to go? Or are you going to continue to sit there? It's the women that begin to get on their knees and pray. It's the women that begin to go in there and pray for their kids. It's the women that go and begin to do everything that they can because they want to see God move in their life. But I'm going to tell you tonight, the Bible tells us that the men are the head of the household, and it's not to boast you up as a man or a husband. Tonight, you are to be the spiritual leader of your house. If you're married or if you're not, Tim, if you're a man, you are to be the spiritual leader of your household tonight. And so many times we find ourselves not being in that place because that's what's happened. Men have found things in their life that are more important to them than God. They found going sitting in a tree stand is more important than God. They found going to a ball game is more important than God. They found sitting playing a video game is more important than God. They found that instead of going to church, I'm going to watch this TV show or I'm going to watch this football game on TV. That's become more important to men these days. And I'm going to tell you tonight, until the men get your priorities straight, we're going to continue to be in that same shape tonight. So tonight, if you're living in that way, I'm going to tell you tonight, you may not like it, but your wife should not be the one that's dragging you to church. It should be the other way around. You should be dragging her to church. I'm going to tell you tonight, that's how it should be. But so many times, it's the women that are pouring their husbands to church and telling them, oh, we need to pray. We need to do all these things. It's the women. And how backwards is that, Tim? How backwards is it tonight? That God is ordained the men and it's setting the men up to be the head of the household. But so many times the men don't want it. They want to give it to somebody else. They want to give it to their wife. And how awful is that? If I'm in that place, shame on me. If I begin, Tim, I ain't gonna lie to you. There's times in my life it has been Lindsay that came and drugged me to church because I didn't want to go. I wanted to give up because of things that are gone wrong in my life. But I'm going to tell you tonight, the only way that we can be an example to this lost and dying world, Tim, is for the men to get back to where God set them. And quit allowing the women to be the spiritual leaders of the church. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe that sometimes it will take the woman to get the man in church. And I'm thankful for the women that have went through that, and they began to get their husbands or their boyfriends or whoever the case may be, and they've guided them to church. But God came in and changed their life and made them into the man of God that they are today. I'm thankful for them. But I'm going to tell you, that's not how God set it up tonight. God set it up for the men to be the head of the household. So men, we need to start being the head of the household and not boasting yourself up and saying, Lindsay, you go do that. Lindsay, you go do this. Because the Bible tells us for us to love our wives as ourselves. The Bible tells us to love them, to not downgrade them. I'm going to be honest with you, Tim. How many times have we been out in public and we've seen men begin to treat their wife like dirt and talk to her like she doesn't mean anything to them? I'm going to tell you something tonight, church. If you're not loving your wife the way you need to, loving your spouse the way you need to, and you're doing it out in public, these people are going to see that, and they're not going to want no part of you tonight. And I'm just being honest tonight, Tim. If I treated Lindsay like a dog, nobody wants to see that. They want to see me treat her with the same respect that God treats me with, that same love that God had for me. He wants you to treat your wife that way, and I'm here to tell you tonight, if you're not doing that, shame on you and shame on me. Your wife should be precious to you. You know why? Because God gave her to you. God gave her to you tonight. He did. I'm thankful, Tim, when I was praying and praying that God would send me the woman that I needed. And I'm telling you tonight that as I began to get down and pray and pray and pray, and God delivered, He sent me the exact woman I needed, exact spouse that I needed in my life. And I'm telling you, Tim, He's told me that I need to treat her with the utmost respect, and I need to treat her as I love as us men love ourselves sometimes. We need to love them. Love that woman that God gave you tonight. Because if you can't show her that love, you're not going to show this lost and dying world that same love. You're not. That's just how it is. If you can't respect her and love her, you're not going to love this world the way you need to love them. So I was thinking, Tim, that could be one reason why that we're still stuck in the boat. Because the men have took a back seat and said, I'm going to let the woman do it. I'm going to let my wife do it. We shouldn't be that way. We should be the spiritual leaders of our church tonight, and I do believe that. And I believe that with everything in me. And I was thinking there, I was looking in Scripture in Ephesians. It says at the beginning, it says, wives, submit yourselves to your husband. And I thought about that. I thought about my relationship with my wife that God gave me. So He gave me my wife. And I thought about that relationship that I've had with her. And that there's so many times in my life, and Tim's mentioned it, and there's other people that's mentioned it, that we've began to want to quit. And we've began to want to say, you know what, I don't want to do this thing no more. But it's always my wife that was there supporting me. So when I looked at that and it said, Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands. I believe that that our wives need to support our husbands. I'm thankful that God sent me a wife that supports me, and I'm going to tell you tonight, if wives, if you're not supporting your husbands, we need to get our heart right. And I'm not saying this, I'm not trying to be mean, but so many times we want to just do what we want to do, and we don't want to support maybe our husband's ministry. Maybe you just want to do and go and support. And don't get me wrong, I believe that we all have a ministry. I believe that we're all called to do something. But I do believe that He's called the women here to help me, that support to us men to help us to get through. Because sometimes, Tim, I can be weak and I can need some help. And I'm thankful that God gave me a wife that will be that support to me. And I'm going to encourage you tonight to be to your husband when this whole world is against him. I'm going to be honest with you. As a man, we try to take on everything, don't we, Tim? We try, when things come up in life, we try to fix it, and we try to fix it ourselves, and we put so much on our shoulders instead of giving it to God. But so many times we load our shoulders down. I'm going to tell you tonight, when your husband's down tonight, wives, support them. Be that helpmeet. Be that person that's there for them when nobody else is. Because there will be times tonight, wives, when you go, when your husband has nobody in his corner but you, support him tonight with everything in you. Because God, just like God gave me my wife, God gave me to Lindsay. And I believe that she'll be there to support me through thick and thin, no matter what. So tonight, church, we were looking at both husband and wives, and it doesn't have to be husband and wife. It can just be a man and a woman, whatever the case may be. Support your husbands tonight. Be that help when they stand in need of it. I thought there, Tim, maybe that's why we've not got out of the boat. Maybe we've allowed Satan to come in and change our hearts, change our minds, change our desires. Because when we look here and we think about when we get past our duties as a husband and our duties as a wife, and we begin to look at just our Christian, our godly duties as a child of God. When we begin to look at those, the first one we looked at and thought about, and I've already said it, but that's to put God first. And then when we began to look farther, I began to think of so many times. The Bible says pray without ceasing. And I've looked at that many a times, Tim, and I've sat and I thought, well, there's no way that I can sit there and continuously pray 24/7. But I'm going to encourage you tonight, church, that we need to start praying more. Don't wait till Saturday night to start praying for Sunday. Don't wait till Tuesday night to start praying for Wednesday. Don't wait till Wednesday to pray for Wednesday. Don't wait for Sunday to pray for Sunday. Begin to pray, church. That's the only way that we're going to start seeing these things happen, Tim. If I want to get out of the boat, Tim, I'm going to have to start praying a little bit and saying, Lord, help me to get out of the boat because I'm stubborn and I'm backward and shy and whatever excuse you want to use. I'm going to tell you tonight that God can take that excuse and take it away and make it, and instead of an excuse, that'll be the reason why we do it. I step out of the boat, Tim, because I'm shy. What do you mean? I step out of the boat tonight, Tim, because I'm shy. Because when I put my faith in God, just as Peter began to put his faith in God and step out of the boat, God is there to help us walk on the water, Tim. He's there to help us get through anything that we're going through. So I'm going to tell you tonight to pray tonight. Pray for those that are lost. And we've heard it here recently. Don't just throw up a random prayer, but have a little meaning behind it. Mean it when you get down on your knees. We heard it, I believe it might have been Wednesday or Sunday night. Don't begin to get down and just mumble the same prayer over and over. But get down and mean it with everything in you. If you want to see somebody in your family saved, get down and mean it with everything you got tonight. So now we put God first. Began to pray. And I'm going to look at it like this, Tim. I heard somebody talking the other day. we as God's people should listen to what God tells us to do, right? He should be, like we said, He should be number one. We should listen to what God has to say. When God tells us to do something, we should do it. I believe that there's everything in me. But I heard this said the other day. God, it was a conversation, began to ask them, said, have you ever raised your hand in church? Oh, no, I ain't going to do that. Question God asked, well, why? Oh, God's never told me to do that. Has God never told you to do that tonight, church? Or has He told you and we're just ignoring it? I was thinking there, and when I was watching this and they were beginning to talk, they began to ask the question. They began to say, when you go to a ball game, when I go to a ball game, and Camden or Connor scores a run, or they score a goal in basketball, I shout, right? I raise my hand and shout. I clap my hands, all these things. We begin to do that because we want to do it, right? Because that's something that we love seeing our favorite team score. We love seeing our kids do good. We begin to shout. We begin to throw our hands up. But then again, when it comes to church and God says to raise your hand and shout a little bit, we hesitate. Why do we do that? Because God is not who He needs to be Monday through Saturday. He's not. If God was who He needed to be in your life Monday through Saturday, you would have no issue when you come to church and He says to raise your hand or to raise your hand and shout right then. So many times we think about it, Tim, but I can go to I'm going to be honest with you, Tim. If I'd have been at that Tennessee ball game last night, I'd have been cheering and shouting like a madman. I would have. I tell you tonight, so many times we can go to those ball games and we can shout and we can raise our hands and all these different things, but when God comes by for just a little while when we're at church and we're trying to worship, we don't want to worship Him because we're afraid to raise our hands. I don't know why you're afraid to raise your hand. God should mean more to you than that Tennessee football game. God should be more than you than that ball game that you go to watch your kids on. And God should mean more to you than everything else in this world. So when God begins to mean more to us than this world and the things of it, we'll start to raise our hand. We'll start to shout. And we was talking about it in Sunday school this morning. We'll begin to have those good services, not just those ones to bring the cold chills for a little while, but like you preached on the other night, Tim, or the other day, Tim, we'll begin to have those Holy Spirit meetings begin to fall. People begin to run, and people begin to shout, and it doesn't stop. So many times we find ourselves, the church will begin to start to have a good service. And then we begin to sit back, don't we, Tim? We don't let the Spirit begin to continue to flow. That's because the Bible teaches us that the Spirit is easily offended. So when it gets to me, Tim, and I say no, I don't want no part of it, and it gets to me, it goes to Nathan, and then Nathan begins to say no, I don't want any part of it, and then it gets him and goes to Landon, and Landon says I don't want any part of it. It gets easily offended. I'm going to tell you tonight, we need to start doing what God has told us to do. When He says to come, when we're in the house of God, and when He says to worship, worship Him. When He says to pray, pray. When He says to lift your hands tonight. That's why we're still in the boat. But it goes on. In verse 29, He said, and Jesus told him, He said, come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. And I believe that this is where some of us could be tonight too as well. Verse 30, but when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. I began to think there, Tim, how Peter began to get out there. And God commanded him and said, you can come. So Peter should have knew. When Jesus said to come, Peter knew that when he got out on that water, he wasn't going to sink. He began to get out there on that water, and he began to walk, and then distraction began to set in. The things around him begin to set in. Tonight, church, maybe you're distracted. And the reason and Peter's distraction here was fear. We heard about that Wednesday night when Monica began to talk to us about things that she's been through and how afraid that she was and how fear had set in. Tim, when growing up, I've told this many times, I'm afraid of the dark. So when Mom and Dad would tell me I could go to Mama's, but I had to walk, and it was dark outside, I didn't want to go to Mama's. When Mom and Dad would say, come home from Mama's, but it was dark, I didn't want to walk. I didn't want to come home because it was dark outside. That's what fear does to us. When we begin to allow fear in our life, it begins to consume us. Fear will consume your whole life. That's all you'll think about. You'll think about whatever it is that you're afraid of, whatever it is in your life that's come up that gave you that fear, it will begin to consume your life. And I'm going to encourage you tonight, what did Peter do as he began to fear? It says, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And verse 31 says, and immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him. And that's what we have to do tonight when fears come up in our life, because fear is going to prevent you from doing a lot of things that God's called you to do. It's going to prevent you from worshiping God the way that we should. It's going to prevent you from treating God like you should Monday through Saturday. Fear will prevent that. So tonight, church, I'm going to encourage you that if there's fear in the way, look to Jesus and let him take that fear away. And just if you're afraid, and we're coming to a close tonight, so if somebody wants to come get us a song. And if we found ourselves tonight being in a shape to where we can't get out of the boat, church, we got to get out of the boat. The Bible teaches us that we don't know the day nor the hour that God will come, will send Jesus to come back and get the church. We don't know the time when God will come back and get us tonight. We don't know that. So when we still have lost, and Tim had mentioned this, I believe, over the last few services, he's mentioned it. The more and more that the lost keep walking out that door, the closer and closer to hell they're getting. And does it mean enough to us tonight that we're going to get out of the boat? Does it mean enough to us that when we begin to sink, we're going to call out to Christ and say, Lord, save me, help me? Does the loss mean enough to you tonight to do that? If not, I believe we need to get our heart right, or there's not that marriage between us and Jesus. We haven't accepted him into our heart as our personal Savior tonight. And I hate to say that, but the Bible tells us, how do you know that you've passed from death to life? You love your brother tonight. And so that love, you should not want to see anybody die lost and undone tonight. So that should be our desire. So tonight, church, if you're not out of the boat or you're sinking, tonight would be a good night to make things right and to get out of the boat and begin to walk to him tonight. As they begin to sing, if somebody would get us a song tonight, or as they begin to sing, we can stand. for everybody that's came up this way. But has anybody got anything on your heart you need to say or do? Anyone else? Thank you for that. All right. I'm going to, I guess, try to give Waylon a hard time tonight, but Tim began to remind me, give Landon a hard time when he got here because he's late. But then the more I thought about it, Tim, I can't give him a hard time because I show up late by him. But yeah, I'm thankful for everybody tonight. I am thankful for my church family. Thankful for all you all for praying for us. And it is a lot easier when you begin to stand and begin to know that your church family's got your back. So I do. I am thankful for all you all as well tonight. But anybody else got? Oh, the announcements. Remember, I ain't gonna get any of these announcements right. I know we've got trunk or treat the 26th. So do remember that. I think there's a sign-up sheet, like if you want to bring some stuff and if you want a pumpkin, correct, back there. Do remember our program that Chelsea's doing. She has put that sign-up sheet back there. Do be willing to step out and help her out. I know it helps when you know you've got a lot of people that are willing to back you up and help you through something that I've never put a program together like that, Tim, but I know that I've seen Dad do it and I've seen Monica do it and I've seen other people they poured their heart into it and seen Chelsea do it last year and just how they pour their hearts into it. But we should be able to back them up as their church family. I do believe that, and how we do that is we just sign up and help and pray for them. I do remember the shoebox. We're packing shoeboxes on the. So if you have any questions.